Hello and welcome back to Down to the Tyre. Now, you'll have to bear with me a little bit this week because I have not been well, but I didn't want to let you go a week without an episode, so here I am. This might be a little bit shorter than usual. I may have to pause recording a few times if I start coughing, but we're here and that's what matters. And today, obviously, we've just had the Lewis Hamilton to Ferrari announcement this week, which, mind blown, shocking, but also I think it kind of makes sense. I feel like Lewis sort of must know that he's probably not going to win another championship with Mercedes. They're probably not going to sort the problems with their car quickly enough for him. Obviously, he's 39 years old. And I feel like it surely must be every, or almost every, racing driver's dream to wear that red suit and drive that red car at some point in their career. So fair play to him. And I'm really excited to see how 2025 goes for him. But this also does mean that there is a seat open at Mercedes, which got me thinking, what feeder series drivers could we see in F1 in 2025? So that's what I'm going to talk about today. Just which feeder series drivers I think are going to make it into F1 this time next year. Which drivers who, when it's the 4th of February 2025, which drivers are we going to see make their F1 debuts in Bahrain in a few weeks' time? So let's get into it. I'll obviously be kind of making my other predictions about where I think drivers on the grid are going to go, because it kind of all fits together, if that makes sense. So I'll be predicting, which current F1 drivers on the grid will be staying at their teams, which ones will be moving. But the main focus will be the feeder series drivers who I think will make it into F1 in 2025. So without further ado, let's get right into it. Hello, it's Gemma from the future here, just hopping in with a quick disclaimer. Firstly, I've recorded this episode before any of those Alex Albon to Red Bull in 2025 rumours surfaced, the rumours that he might have been offered a 3-year contract with Red Bull starting from 2025. So I didn't mention that at all in this episode because I just thought the idea of him going back to Red Bull just wasn't an option. So yeah, I didn't predict that at all, but now it's being rumoured that it's potentially happening. So yeah, that's why that isn't included in this episode, is because I recorded this before any of that was circulating. Secondly, I said that Andrea Kimi Antonelli is 18 now, and then he will be 19 if he steps into F1 in 2025. That's wrong. I've aged him by a year. He is 17 right now, so he will be 18 next year. So if he steps into F1 in 2025, he will be 18. So I was a year out with that. So I just wanted to correct that as well. But anyway, me from the future is going to leave now. But I hope you enjoy this episode. And please remember to follow me on Spotify, Instagram, TikTok, etc. Okay, bye now. So I feel like I'll get the boring ones out the way. The teams where I think the drivers are going to stay exactly the same. And the first one is McLaren. I don't think Norris or Piastri are going to be out of their seats for 2025. Obviously, Norris is contracted for ages. So, yeah, I think McLaren is going to stay completely the same. No juniors will be taking any McLaren seats in 2025. Obviously, we've also got Ferrari as well. We know that Leclerc is contracted again for forever. He's never leaving that Ferrari team. Lewis Hamilton is now contracted there on a multi-year contract starting from 2025. So again, there's not going to be any feeder series drivers who will be taking a Ferrari seat in 2025. Another team where I think there will be changes, but I don't think it will be a junior feeder series driver who is taking the seat that will be changed, is Red Bull. Obviously, Verstappen is still going to be there in 2025, no doubt about it. But I don't think it will be Perez alongside him. But I also don't think it will be a driver from the feeder series. I think it will be Daniel Ricciardo. I think he'll be at, I was going to just call it AlphaTauri. I don't want to call it Visa Cash App RB every time I want to speak about it. But then just calling it RB just sounds like I'm speaking about Red Bull. So I've not quite figured this one out yet. I've seen some people saying that they just are going to call it Toro Rosso, which, yeah, that's the best name the team has ever had, hands down. I feel like part of me just wants to stick with AlphaTauri because I just don't want to call it. It's such a mouthful, isn't it? Visa Cash App RB. And there's no way of shortening it, really. I mean, I could just call it Visa, but that's just a sponsor. That's not a proper team name. I don't know. I don't know what to call it at this point. The Red Bull sister team, I guess. Anyway, I've gone off on a complete tangent, but Ricciardo drove for AlphaTauri a little bit in 2023. Obviously, broken wrist kind of put a spanner in the works over there. But he's back full-time for the team in 2024. I think once he's done a year there, I mean, he can't stay there forever. We know a driver of his calibre isn't going to be at Red Bull's sister team forever. I think their end goal here must surely be to promote him to the top team, Red Bull. So I feel like he will partner Verstappen in 2025 and Perez will be out of the sport. I feel like Perez was given a lifeline by Red Bull back after Racing Point dropped him. He took that lifeline and I think he's done pretty well with that lifeline when you consider the alternative was that he was just not going to be racing in F1 anymore. And I feel like he took that lifeline and I think he's done the best he can with it. I really don't think he could have done much more with that opportunity he was given. Obviously, in 2023, I think the gap between Verstappen and Perez was more apparent than ever, particularly as the season progressed. But I think Perez's time might have just come. He's got a young family. I feel like it might just be a logical time for him to move on at the end of 2024. But ultimately, I don't think it will be his decision, his choice. But I do think Red Bull will decide it's time to make some changes in the team and give Ricciardo the chance. In one of my previous episodes, I did predict that they might do it mid-season. Now, that was just me trying to make bold predictions. I think it's exciting to make bold predictions and just say things that maybe are a little bit unhinged. But hey, you look really clever when they do happen, right? But I don't know if I actually genuinely think that will happen or if I'm just hoping for the drama of if it does happen. But either way, I think Ricciardo will be in the seat for 2025 alongside Max Verstappen at Red Bull. So those are the three teams, McLaren, Ferrari and Red Bull, who I definitely think there is no chance they will have a feeder series driver in their F1 team for 2025. I think all of the drivers who are going to be driving for them either have driven for them in 2024 or previously, or will just be switching teams across the grid to drive for them. So now it comes to a bit more of a complicated, murky situation where these are the teams where I think potentially there could be a feeder series driver who steps up to the F1 team in 2025, but also equally, I think they could retain the same lineup, the same drivers that they've had in 2024, or they could just retain drivers who are already on the grid. So that's the situation we're in. I'm just not sure about these teams. I'm 50-50 on whether a junior driver will take the seat for 2025 and they will get an opportunity at F1, or if it will just remain the drivers who are already on the grid this day. So yeah, let's get into those. There are a couple that I feel this way about. The first one is Aston Martin. Now, I think Alonso will stay for 2025 at Aston Martin. Obviously, he's the oldest driver on the grid, but I think he's still very hungry. He's still clearly very talented, very passionate. I think he will still be at Aston Martin in 2025. And I've seen a lot of people throwing his name in the ring for that Mercedes seat. But I do think that Mercedes will want to pick someone younger who they can invest in for the long term. I'll get into that a little bit later. But I think Alonso will still be at Aston Martin in 2025. Stroll's the tricky one. Stroll's tricky, isn't he? I mean, he's literally the team owner's son. Like, that is the biggest sort of conflict of interest there could possibly be. I feel like, obviously, his own dad isn't going to want to fire him, is he? So part of me wants to say that I just think, even though I think there probably are drivers more deserving of that Aston Martin seat than Lance Stroll, I kind of just see him staying. I just don't see how he can get kicked out of this scenario. However, obviously, there is now the opportunity that they could move him into the World Endurance Championship, with Aston Martin branching into that. But also, I just don't know, because obviously when you've been in F1, that must feel like a bit of a downgrade when F1 has been your dream and your aspiration, if that makes sense. I love the World Endurance Championship. I love endurance racing. But I feel like to be told you're having to leave the F1 team and go and do this other thing instead, it almost must feel like a demotion. Even though I think it would actually be a really good move for Stroll. And I think he's a really talented driver. I just don't think F1 suits him. But I don't know how he'd take that news. I don't know whether he'd view that as a good move or whether he'd be insulted. And I don't know whether... I mean, I almost feel like Lawrence Stroll is kind of living his own dream through his son. Like, his son is a Formula One driver and Lawrence pretty much bought the team so that could happen. And I don't know if he will want his son not to be in F1, almost for selfish reasons in a way. But I'm not 100% sure. So then, obviously, if they were to say to Stroll, you can race for us in the World Endurance Championship instead, then obviously they'd have a seat spare. And I was trying to think who would move there otherwise. I've seen a lot of people saying that Alex Albon could take that seat. But I also, obviously, Felipe Drugovich is there on the sidelines. Now, Felipe's a driver that it's almost like, has that moment passed? Has that ship sailed? Is that ever going to happen again? And I just don't know if that... I know he only won F2 in 2022. It's only a couple of years ago, but obviously by 2025 it would have been longer. I just don't know if with Drugovich, is he kind of stuck in that reserve driver role? Is he ever going to be able to get out of that? So yeah, as you can see, I'm very stuck on Aston Martin about what I think is going to happen in 2025, about who I think is going to be driving for them. But ultimately, I think it's definitely going to be Alonso. And then I think it's either going to be Stroll or Felipe Drugovich. And that will depend on whether they find a seat for Stroll in their World Endurance Championship situation that they've got going on. So yeah, Aston Martin's a big question mark. And so is Alpine. But Alpine kind of... It's a difficult one to talk about because it's going to foreshadow what I'm about to say later about Mercedes, because obviously we've got Ocon. And Ocon is obviously very closely linked to Toto Wolff and closely linked to Mercedes, even though he's been at Alpine/Renault for quite a few years now. But I just don't know what's going to happen with Ocon. Are we going to see him take that Mercedes seat in 2025? I'll speak about that more later when I speak about Mercedes in full. But if he does take that seat, then obviously there will be an opening for a junior driver. I think Gasly is staying at Alpine for 2025, definitely. I think Gasly's a definite. Ocon I'm a bit more uncertain about. But obviously, yeah, I'll speak more about why I think Ocon could get that Mercedes seat in a later section of this episode. But for now, I'll just say Ocon is a question mark about whether he will be staying at Alpine in 2025. If he doesn't, I mean, Alpine have a lot of juniors to pick from, don't they? They've got Jack Doohan, who is their reserve driver for 2024. He has done F2. He did F2 last year and the year before. He did pretty well both years, and now he's done the classic reserve driver trajectory, F2 to reserve driver trajectory, because there's just no seats for him. And it could be a Felipe Drugovich situation where he just ends up stuck in that reverse driver role, or he could just be in that role for a year and then get a seat. Who knows? Then we've also got Victor Martins, who is in F2 this year and is undeniably a championship contender. Victor Martins is a great driver, and he was also the rookie champion in F2 in 2023. I just feel like there's a great chance that he will be going for the F2 title this year, and I really do feel like if he does win F2, then how are Alpine going to ignore him? I mean, they can just put him in a reserve driver role, sure. But if they've got that seat open, then it makes sense for them to put him in it if he's won it. So yeah, with Alpine, my overall thoughts are Gasly's a definite. Ocon is a potential. He's got a question mark next to him. If Ocon isn't in the picture, then Martins or Doohan, depending on how this year's F2 goes. Another team that is a big question mark about whether I think they're going to have a junior feeder series driver join them for 2025 is Williams. Now, Williams is such a difficult one because obviously there was the situation before where they used to get Mercedes juniors joining them, but that was back when Mercedes sort of had that kind of deal with them. They've obviously still got a really good relationship with them, but it's like not the same as it used to be. And I feel like this might be controversial, but I think Sargent is a definite. Sargent is going to stay. I think he'll do enough this year to prove himself. I've got it on my motorsport bingo card for 2024 that Sargent is going to get in the points in 2024, and I think he's going to do it multiple times. So we'll see. That could be a bold prediction, but I think Logan Sargent will keep his seat at Williams for 2025. The next seat is the one that I'm a bit more confused about. Obviously, Albon could stay. He could continue to form this team around him, grow it and build it around him as the central main number one driver. Or he could get a better offer. And, I mean, if he gets a better offer, then I feel like he should take it. Mercedes is obviously the one he is being linked to. A lot of people are putting his name down as who they think is going to take the seat that Hamilton is leaving open at Mercedes. A lot of people, as I said previously, have mentioned Aston Martin related to him, but I don't know. It just depends. He could stay at Williams, and I don't think that would be a bad decision for him, but also he could get a better offer. But then obviously if he does get a better offer and he leaves, then that leaves that Williams seat open. And I mean, there are so many drivers who I feel like could take that seat for 2025. I mean, firstly, we've got another Mercedes-linked driver, Andrea Kimi Antonelli. I know I said that Mercedes don't really have as close ties with Williams as they used to, but I'm sure Williams wouldn't say no to taking Andrea Kimi Antonelli if he was to do really well in F2 this year. I feel like they probably wouldn't turn him down, but then that also will depend on how their own juniors do, because back when Williams were taking Mercedes juniors, they didn't have as established of a driver academy as they have now. They've got genuinely some of who I believe are the strongest feeder series drivers in their academy, particularly at the F2 level at the moment. Zach O'Sullivan and Franco Colapinto. Obviously, they're both in their rookie year, as is Andrea Kimi Antonelli. So I feel like who takes that seat at Williams, it just really revolves around what happens with the Mercedes seat, really. It's all just intertwined and linked. And it also depends on F2 as well. It also depends on how all of these feeder series drivers do in F2. So I feel like Sargent's, in my opinion, a definite. I think Sargent will stay for 2025. I'm not sure if he'll stay after that. It will depend on how he performs. But for 2025, I think he's definitely going to stay. Then that second Williams seat is a lot more difficult. It could be Albon, if Mercedes aren't interested in him, or if no other team are interested in him. It could be Antonelli, if Mercedes feel the jump to their own team is too big and they want to put him in Williams for a bit. Obviously, Williams would have to agree to that. And that would probably depend on how their own juniors do in their rookie seasons of F2, Zach O'Sullivan and Franco Colapinto. So yeah, there are lots of names involved here. And I just feel it's too soon for me to predict who exactly that's going to be, because I do think it will all just come down to how the F2 season goes this year. So they're my thoughts on Williams. And the final team, which I think could have a junior driver taking the seat, but also could not, is Mercedes. Now, I've spoken about this Mercedes seat throughout this episode because it just kind of, I feel like now Hamilton's leaving, everything just revolves around that Mercedes seat. All these other transfers that could happen, all these other possibilities, they're kind of all hinged on this Mercedes seat now. Because obviously I think Russell's going to stay. That goes without saying. Russell is definitely going to be at Mercedes in 2025. However, obviously there's now that seat open. And I feel like there are a number of drivers who it could be. I mean, I've ruled out Fernando Alonso, even though I've seen a lot of people saying it, because I just think, sorry, Fernando, but I think he's a little bit too old for Mercedes to be signing him. I feel like they will want to have a younger driver who they can invest in and support, you know, as they grow up, and kind of have a driver who stays there throughout their career, like Hamilton has done. Someone who will really invest in the team and the team can invest in return. So obviously that lends itself to Antonelli very well. But boy, is that a lot of pressure for him to win F2 this year. In his rookie year, after he's just skipped F3, I mean, I just don't know if it's possible. If he wins F2 this year, I will be amazed. I will genuinely be so impressed. And I think, obviously, if he does win F2, then surely Mercedes have got to consider him. I almost feel like with him, they're trying to do what Red Bull did with Max. I feel like they're trying to nurture him from such a young age and really kind of rocket him through the feeder series, like move him through really fast. So then he gets to F1 at a really young age and he has lots of time to develop and grow. And the younger he is, the more world championships he can potentially win. So I feel like that definitely could be what they're going for here. And who knows, it might work. But it will all depend on how F2 goes this year. So Antonelli is definitely an option. But then also, it could be someone who's already on the grid. Ocon, as I mentioned before, he's got those tyres to Toto Wolff. Albon is a name that a lot of people are saying could be the potential person to take the seat. And I just don't know. It's so difficult to predict. It's so difficult because, again, just like the Williams situation, it all just depends on how F2 goes this year. But I just don't think Ocon or Albon are better than Russell. And I think they will want a driver who is at least as good as Russell. I don't think they'll settle for someone who's a bit less. And Albon, I mean, traditionally Albon has had worse results than Russell. He did worse than him in F2, for example. Russell won and Albon came P3. I don't think Ocon is as strong of a driver as Russell either. I just don't think he's got that pure pace that Russell has. So I think maybe they will be banking on Antonelli having a really great rookie year in F2. But obviously it's a lot of pressure on such a young driver and it's a lot to expect. I think really this year will be him getting used to F2. But then if he doesn't win F2, then obviously it makes sense to keep him in F2 for another year. But then if that is the case, then I just don't know who they're going to pick for that seat. It's really difficult to call. So I'm not going to make any concrete predictions now, but I do think Russell will definitely be at Mercedes. And then if it's going to be someone who's currently on the grid, it could be Albon or Ocon. If it's not someone who's currently on the grid, if it's a feeder series driver, then dare I say it could be Andrea Kimi Antonelli. So now we are on to the teams where I actually really do think there is definitely going to be a junior driver, a driver who's done feeder series recently and hasn't done F1 yet in 2025. The first one I'm going to talk about is, I don't know what to call them. Racing Bulls? Alpha Tauri? Visa? Who knows? You know who I mean. I think Tsunoda will stay for 2025. But obviously I've already said that I think Daniel Ricciardo will go to Red Bull for 2025. So this one's pretty obvious. I think Liam Lawson will be one of their drivers for 2025. He's obviously not racing in 2024. He's just doing the reserve role. I think it's great that they put him in Super Formula last year, so he was active in a car, getting experience. He obviously did very well in that. And I think they've got no choice but to give him an F1 seat now. Honestly, I think they should have given him one this year, but that's a whole other story. I just think he really deserved one this year, especially after the few races he did at the end of 2023, but nope, they didn't. Fair enough. What do I know? But I think Lawson definitely deserves a seat in 2025, and I think he will get one alongside Yuki Tsunoda. And I don't have much more to say about that prediction because I'm so sure on it. And if it doesn't happen, I will be very, very sad, because I do not know a driver much more deserving of a chance in Formula One at this point in time than Liam Lawson. The next team that I really, really do think will have a junior driver, a feeder series driver, competing for them in 2025, but perhaps not a feeder series driver who's driving this year, is another team I don't know what to call, hence why I hesitated. I don't want to call them steak. I just don't want to call them steak. I'm a vegetarian. I don't want to call them steak. Sauber. I'm just going to call them Sauber. Okay, settled. Sauber it is. I think Sauber are definitely going to have a feeder series driver in their team for 2025. I think it's going to be a driver who won F2 in 2023, a driver who is racing in Super Formula for 2024. I think Teo Pourchaire will 100% be driving for Sauber, Stake, whatever you want to call them, in 2025. I actually think they're going to have a full lineup change. I don't think either of their drivers are going to be the same for 2025, because I think Carlos Sainz will move over to Sauber, ready for when Audi come in 2026. So I think their lineup will be Sainz and Pourchaire, and I think I've got no doubts about that one. To be honest, I'm pretty certain, I'm pretty sure on it. Obviously, Sainz has a lot of Audi links thanks to his father, who drives in Rally. Pourchaire is in the Sauber Academy. He's won F2. He's doing Super Formula this year, which I'm sure will go well. Again, a bit like Liam Lawson. What more could you want from a driver? He's done everything. He's ticked all the boxes. He's done absolutely everything he can. So I think that is definitely going to be the lineup for the Stake F1 team, or the Sauber F1 team, whatever you want to call them, for 2025. I just, again, don't have much more to add, because I just have no doubts. That's a prediction that I am pretty convinced on at this point. And the final team there is to talk about is Haas. And Haas are the final team that I think is definitely going to have a rookie in their ranks for 2025. Now, this rookie is in F2 this year. He was in F2 last year. He was the runner-up for the rookie championship last year. He's a Ferrari junior. He's going to be Haas's reserve driver for 2024. He's doing 6 FP1s with them. It's obviously Ollie Bearman. Now, I know a lot of people are very wary about Haas. They're very against rookies going to Haas after what happened with Mick Schumacher, and I get it. Especially because it's obviously a similar situation with Mick being a Ferrari junior. Ollie's a Ferrari junior as well. I understand, but I feel like Ferrari know. They've got Hamilton and Leclerc. They're not going to have any space in their team for the foreseeable future for their juniors. And I just think Haas is the best place to go for them. If they want a shot in F1, it's kind of the only option. And it's undeniable that Ollie Bearman deserves a shot in F1. So I think it's got to be Haas or nothing for Bearman. So even though it might not be the optimum choice, I think it's the only one he'll have. And, you know, it's been a couple of years. Haas have hopefully learned from what happened with Mick Schumacher, and hopefully they'll be able to support him and help him progress as a driver better than they did with Mick Schumacher. I hope they have a better system in place to support him and help him. And I think they will have. And I think as well, I don't think he will be joined by a rookie. I don't think it will be a double rookie lineup like it was when Mick Schumacher was there. I think he will be joined by an experienced driver who can help him and guide him along the way. And I think that is Nico Hülkenberg. I don't think they'll keep Magnussen if 2024 goes the same way as 2023 did. Hülkenberg did outperform Magnussen by quite a bit. I think Hülkenberg is the stronger driver out of the two, and I think he's the driver that Haas will keep. So I think Hülkenberg will partner Ollie Bearman. I think this will hopefully completely eradicate what happened with Mick Schumacher, because Bearman will have a much more experienced driver by his side who can help him and teach him and guide him. And I do hope that this all works out. I'm a little bit wary myself, I will admit, but I'm just glad to see Bearman getting a chance in Formula One. Like, he's already their reserve driver for 2024, so I'm, 99% sure that he's going to get a shot at F1 in 2025, assuming his F2 season all goes well, of course. So this is the third and final team that I'm pretty sure is going to have a feeder series driver in their lineup in 2025. So let's recap. these are all of the drivers who I think potentially could step up from the feeder series into Formula One for 2025. We've got Andrea Kimi Antonelli, Liam Lawson, potentially Felipe Drugovich, potentially Victor Martins or Jack Doohan, probably, almost definitely Teo Pourchaire, and probably almost definitely Ollie Bearman. Listing these has made me realise I've completely overlooked Frederick Vesti in this episode when I was talking about Mercedes and Williams, but he could definitely be an option for either team, right? But then also, I'm slightly worried that because Andrea Kimi Antonelli has kind of risen through the ranks at rocket speed, he's gone so quickly from FRECA to F2, I kind of worry that Frederick Vesti, even though he got there first, I almost worry that he's going to get a bit forgotten about and they're going to prioritise Kimi Antonelli. But, you know, I'm going to add Vesti to this list of drivers who I do think could potentially be on the grid in 2025, because I do think that he could be at either Mercedes or Williams. So yeah, forgot to mention him earlier in this episode, but Frederick Vesti, I'll add him to this list because he definitely could be on the grid in 2025. So I guess we'll see in a year's time if any of these predictions have come true, or else I will look very, very silly. So we'll see. But either way, thank you for listening. Sorry if this was a bit shorter of an episode than usual because I am feeling a bit under the weather, but I just wanted to get something out there. And I'm glad I recorded this because it has made me feel a bit re-energised and a bit better, which is great. I hope you enjoyed. Please stay tuned. Throughout February, I'm really hoping we finally get that last F2 announcement. PHM, I'm waiting on you because I really want to do my F2 predictions video. So keep an eye out for that one. Once it finally gets announced, I'll be able to fully record that because I don't want to record it without knowing the full 22 drivers on the grid. So keep an eye out for that one. Coming soon, hopefully. I'm just waiting on that announcement. But for now, I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. And the one thing I really do want to know is who you think is going to take the Mercedes seat in 2025. Comment below, fill out the poll, send in your voice messages. I really want to find out who you think is going to take that Mercedes seat, or message me on TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, whatever. You can find me at Down To The Tyre on all of them. In particular, please do be sure to check out my TikTok because we are just about to hit 1,000 followers. We're about like 3 followers off at the time I'm recording this. So we're so nearly there. So please do go and check me out on TikTok. I feel like a lot of people who listen to this podcast have probably come from my TikTok anyway, but if you haven't, then please do go check it out because I post every single day on there. All the latest feeder series news, announcements, talking points, analysis, it's all on there. So please do go check it out because if you enjoyed this podcast, you're definitely going to enjoy the content that I do on there as well. I can guarantee it. But for now, I'll leave you to it. I hope you have a lovely day or evening or morning, wherever you are. And I'll see you next week for another episode. Goodbye for now.